Hello, I'm Kurma and welcome. In this series, we're going to show you how to cook a wide variety of international vegetarian cuisine from over 30 countries. And in this edition, we're going to show you how to prepare the first in a series of 3 Asian meals. Dishes from Indonesia, Malaysia, China, Vietnam and Thailand. We're going to start off with an Asian-style lunch consisting of Indonesian vegetable stew, sayur asam, coconut rice, and Malaysian-style stuffed pan-fried breads, paratha. So, let's begin. I thought we'd start this section with my version of an Indonesian vegetable stew called sayur asam. In Indonesian cuisine, a sayur is a name for a dish which is somewhere between a stew and a soup. It's very, very juicy. The vegetables are cooked together, sometimes with coconut milk and other interesting ingredients. And the end result is a very, very moist vegetable dish. It's always served with rice, and it can be served as a meal or as a side dish. It's got some very, very interesting ingredients in, so let's take a look at them, shall we? Have a close look at these little fellows over here. This is dried galangal. Galangal is sometimes known as laos. It's the Indonesian type of ginger. It's similar in flavour to the traditional ginger, although it has a more peppery flavour. It adds a very warm, aromatic flavour to your Asian-style cooking. This is the type of packet you're looking for if you're looking for it in the shop. And over here we have a lime leaf. This, believe it or not, is the dried leaf of the lime tree. It imparts a very subtle citrus tang to your cooking. And then over here we have 2 versions of lemongrass. Lemongrass is a beautiful lemon-flavoured herb. This is the lemongrass flakes over here, and here's the lemongrass powder. You can use either one of these when lemongrass is called for, or if you're fortunate, you can get a hold of the fresh stuff. This is the bottle that I purchased my lemongrass powder in. As I mentioned before, this is my version of sayur asam. Some of the vegetables I'm using are what's locally available near my kitchen here, and some of them are very traditional. One of the traditional ingredients is bok choy. This is a beautiful Chinese cabbage. It looks like a miniature Swiss chard or silver beet if you're from Australia. So that's our bok choy leaves. Let's show you now how to cut up our zucchinis in a special rolling cut. Cut off the end. Hold your knife at an angle. Cut, roll, cut, roll. Like so. And while we're here, we might as well finish off our last zucchini. This is 1 pound of zucchini we're using in today's vegetable, along with our bok choy and our green beans and all sorts of other ingredients that I'm going to show you right now. Let's have a close look at all our lovely ingredients here. We've got 2 rings of ginger here that have been cut into slices. If you can get a hold of galangal, all the better. We've got half of a teaspoon of ground coriander powder. We've got 1 fresh hot green chilli that's been seeded and chopped. We've got a tablespoon of corn oil, half a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder, half a cup of green stringless French beans that have been topped and tailed and cut into 2-inch lengths. We've got a dried lime leaf, half a teaspoon of lemongrass powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and 1 cup of coconut milk. And we've got our bok choy leaves here. There's going to be about half a cup when they're shredded up. We've got our 1 pound of zucchinis that have been cut in our nice rolling cut. And we've got 2 cups of our Chinese vegetable stock. So let's get it all together here. I'm going to grab my mortar and pestle, clear the decks here a little bit. Let's get organised. Let's smash up our ginger and our coriander powder. Here's our fresh chilies. And here's our ginger pieces. There's a few more over here. And our coriander powder. Let's grab our pestle and smash this up to a paste. If you like, you can use a food processor for this. There it is. So let's next add a little vegetable stock to our mortar and pestle. Now let's heat up our corn oil in our wok. Slurp of oil and our asafoetida powder. Extract the delicious aromatic flavour from our asafoetida and add our beans. Let's give our green beans a bit of a saute here in the wok for about a minute. They can probably be left alone for a few seconds while we go over and chop up our bok choy. What do you think? Let's gather all our leaves together. This is probably the easiest way to do it. And slice these up into thin strips with our lovely sharp knife here. Okay, back onto the beans. Let's now add our vegetable stock, our paste of ginger and chilies. We've got our lemongrass powder, like so. Give it a bit of a stir up. We need to cook our beans now in our stock for about 5 to 8 minutes until they're nice and soft and tender. Let's pop our lid on top and I'll see you later. Okay, you beans, let's have a look and see if you're done. They look nice. Let's have a stab here. Butter soft. Okay, it's time to add our other vegetables. We've got our bok choy leaves and we've got our lovely chunks of zucchini. Here they go. Let's turn our flame on to full. Give them a stir. Let's cook our zucchinis and our bok choy now for another 3 or 4 minutes or until the zucchinis are just nice and soft, after which we're going to add our final ingredients, the sugar, the salt and the coconut milk. What I might do here is to put the lid back on, help it along a bit, and I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Let's check them out. Ooh, lovely. Nice and soft. I think it's time to add our final ingredients. Our salt, our sugar, last but not least our coconut milk. And there it is, a delicious stew of bok choy, zucchinis and green beans and a beautiful lemongrass, coconut milk scented sauce. Sayur Asam. Far Eastern meals, like other Asian cuisines, have no main course, but rather a number of equally ranked dishes are served together. So in this connection, we're going to make a fluffy Indonesian-style coconut rice here, which is going to be served with the rest of the meal. Let's have a look at our ingredients here for this delicious rice. We've got a cup of basmati rice. This has been washed in cold water, soaked in cold water for 10 minutes, and drained and air-dried for another 10 minutes. We've got 1½ cups of coconut milk. This is Indonesian coconut milk, which is known as santan. You can purchase this at any Asian goods store. We've got ½ teaspoon of salt and 1 lime leaf. This makes a very, very delightful lime and coconut flavoured rice. The first thing we're going to do is take our coconut milk, bring it over to our pot, pop it inside, like so, turn on our flame, and stirring carefully, bring it to the boil. In many simple peasant communities in Indonesia today, vegetarianism is almost an economic necessity. Meat is only eaten occasionally on special occasions. So our coconut milk is coming to the boil now. Let's give it a stir, make sure it doesn't stick on the bottom. Let's add our salt, our lime leaf, and carefully put in our washed, drained and dried rice. Now we should give it a stir and bring it back to the boil. For that we're going to have to put our lid on, hold it down for a few seconds on our fullest flame. Let's have a peek at our rice here. Yes, the coconut milk is coming to the boil. So now we have to turn our flame down to the very, very lowest, the tiniest flame available. This way the rice cooks very, very slowly. We don't want to cook it too fast, otherwise those delicate grains are going to break. Because when you wash rice, it becomes very fragile. And also coconut milk has a tendency to burn. So this is a secret now. We need a very heavy-duty pot, a very tight-fitting lid, and 10 minutes now on the smallest flame, and hopefully that rice will be fluffy and aromatic in 10 minutes. Then we're going to get a fork and give it a quick stir, pop the lid back on for another 5 minutes, and it should have steamed to perfection. So after 10 minutes we're lifting our lid. Our rice is 3/4 done. Let's gently, gently, gently fluff it with a fork. This is an important operation here. We have to hold our breath and stir very carefully. It's very hard holding one's breath and talking at the same time though. I think that's sufficient. Let's pop the lid back on and wait another 5 minutes and our rice should be fluffy and cooked. Well, it's been 5 minutes since we stirred our rice. Let's have a peek at it now. Oh, lovely. Nice and fluffy. Let's take one of those grains of rice and squeeze it between our fingers. It's butter soft. A delightful batch of coconut rice. And there we have it, a beautiful pot of Indonesian coconut rice. Actually, as the steam wafts up here, the aroma of coconut is overwhelming. And there's a wonderful citrus overtone coming from that lime leaf there. It's actually a remarkable combination. Indonesian coconut rice. Welcome to the last segment of the show. I'd like to share with you now the art of making Malaysian-style paratas. Paratas are a fabulous type of pan-fried bread stuffed with seasoned vegetables. It's interesting to note actually that these are a hybrid between Malaysian and Indian cuisine, because prior to the 15th century, Indian Hindu migrants migrated to Malaysia and they brought with them their distinct cooking style. So what we have now is a Indian-style bread with a Malaysian-style filling, and they're very, very delicious. Let's take a close look at our ingredients here. Firstly, for the vegetable stuffing. We've got 2 cups of grated Chinese cabbage. We've got 1½ cups of peeled and grated carrots. We've got a cup of mung bean shoots, a teaspoon of soy sauce, half a teaspoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of corn flour, and 2 tablespoons of safflower oil, and half a teaspoon of yellow asafoetida powder. And in the pastry department, we have a tablespoon of safflower oil, we have half a teaspoon of salt, we have 2 cups of plain flour and enough cold water to make a soft, pliable dough. So the first thing we're going to do is come over here and heat up our wok and add our safflower oil, and we're going to saute all our ingredients for our filling, and then we're going to put it aside to cool and make our pastry. So in goes the oil. Put in our oil and our yellow asafoetida powder, our cabbage, our carrots, and our bean shoots. Now we have to briskly stir fry these vegetables for about 4 or 5 minutes to bring out their lovely flavours. And the hotter you can fry them, the better. Well, it's been about a couple of minutes and our vegetables are going nice and soft. And it's getting to the stage where we're going to add our soy sauce, which is our next ingredient. In fact, I think we can add our soy sauce now. Soy sauce, our sugar, and our salt. Give it a stir up. And while this is happening, I'm going to mix up a little bit of a thickening paste now. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to drain a little bit of water off like this. Take that liquid, pour it into a little bowl, Take a little more. Take it over here and mix up our corn flour with it. Let's add our corn flour to our vegetable juice. Stir it till it's dissolved. Let's take it over to our wok and thicken our vegetable filling. Like so. This soaks up all that extra moisture, like so. Now we're going to turn off our flame, place our filling on our plate over here, and we're going to allow it to cool down. Let's scrape every last bean shoot out of our wok here. Let's spread out our filling nicely so it cools down. And I'm going to take it over to our sink and cool it down. Now I'm going to show you how to make the pastry. Take a big bowl, dump in the flour, sprinkle of salt. Let's add our oil. Let's rub this in now to make a coarse, meal-like consistency. This is important, this rubbing action, so that all that oil is completely mixed into the whole batch of flour, rubbing, rubbing, rubbing until all the pastry resembles breadcrumbs. Now we're going to add our water, cold water, a little bit at a time, until you get the right consistency. The right consistency, by the way, should be just soft enough to be able to knead it nicely and not too sticky, otherwise it's very hard to handle. That's the golden rule with pastry. You just have to add the right amount of liquid, and it takes a little bit of experience. We've measured about half a cup of water, but we probably don't need it all, so just add a little bit at a time. In fact, I've added about 3/4 of that amount and it's done the trick. Of course, the test of a good pastry is you can scrape all the little bits of dough that are left in the bowl with your large lump of dough into one lump, and you can, practically speaking, clean the bowl. Of course, the pot washers will have to have a better job on that later. But place your dough now on a board and knead it. That means pressing down with the heel of one's palm, putting all one's weight, I've got an advantage here, into the pastry, so that actually there's a little art to kneading. It's fold, press, turn. Take the piece of dough which is furthest away from you, stretch, fold, press, turn. Of course, when you knead, this happens automatically. It's just an automatic process. You don't have to think about it. And as you knead, that dough becomes silky and smooth. I do have a batch of dough that I made previously. I'll put our dough over here, pull out our dough which I kneaded up for about 10 minutes before. I had a burst of inspiration, and I just kept kneading and kneading and kneading, and here it is. Have a feel. I guess you can't, but you can take my word for it that it's actually very, very soft, and as you can see, it maneuvers very, very nicely. This is the important thing for paratha dough. It has to be very, very silky smooth and maneuverable. Now, what we're going to do now is roll it out into a long, I guess you could say a snake-like object, and we're going to cut it up into 10 even-sized pieces. So excuse me while I just measure it out so it's nice and even. And I'm going to slice it into 10 chunks, because we're making 10 parathas out of this much pastry. Right. So I guess that means we cut it into 5. I'm really glad I went to school. And then cut each of those halves in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like so, 10 pieces. Now we're going to start rolling our parathas. Let's clear some of the mess away here, like so. On a clean cutting board, or a rolling board, whatever you like, or even a smooth Laminex tabletop, take a good rolling pin, take one of those little lumps of dough, form it into a little patty, press it down and start to roll very carefully with your rolling pin, until that disc gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we don't stop until it gets to about 10 inches wide. And you want to roll it thinner and thinner as you go, because the secret of these paratas is they're wafer thin. So this takes a bit of care and a little bit of patience. Just a little bit more rolling to be done here. Okay, let's take a spoonful of filling, place it in the center of our pastry like so. Spread it out that far. Fold one side over like so. Take a little bowl of water, a few drops of water, run it along that edge, pull over the other edge like so, until these two sides are parallel. Seal. A little bit of water down there, a little bit of water down there. Fold. And there you have a square-shaped paratha. Now with that, very careful. Actually, it's important not to get too much water on the cutting board, otherwise these things stick. And very, very carefully roll it out as smooth as you can without breaking through the pastry. You can hear the filling inside squelching around a little bit. So just rolling, 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 ever so gently, just until you can flatten that paratha to the point where you can see the filling showing through, but it isn't bursting out. That's the stage you want to get them to. You can see with the orange there, that's the carrot showing through the pastry, although we actually haven't broken through, although there's a tiny little rupture there, but that's not going to hurt too much. When we've rolled all our 10 parathas, we're going to take them over to our griddle and we're going to pan fry them. So I'm going to continue on rolling here until I'm done. So why don't you come back in about 10 minutes. Okay, our last paratha. Let's take our little specimen over to our tava. This is our fabulous paratha pan. Notice how it's got a U shape. This is so you can catch all the ghee or the oil in the center, and the paratha cooks very comfortably in there. Splash a little bit of safflower oil in there. Place our paratha in the center. And now we have to gently, gently cook our little fellow until he's golden brown on both sides. Now our paratha's got that lovely marbled effect. We want to gradually reach that stage on both sides. This requires a little patience now, every now and again, a little splash of oil to keep it cooking. Well, don't these look gorgeous? These are, honestly, I can say, even though I did cook them myself, the best batch of Malaysian-style parathas that have come out of my kitchen anyway. Let's turn off our flame here, pop them on our transfer tray. Actually, there's one last thing that you might need to know about parathas, is what to serve them with. Well, I'll show you. I've got a beautiful platter here, sterling silver platter, with all sorts of lovely chutneys. We've got a tamarind and date sauce, a chili sauce, and a beautiful yogurt dip. So all we need to do now is to serve our delicious parathas on the platter, and I don't think we're going to have any trouble in finding takers for our lovely stuffed Malaysian-style pan-fried breads parathas. Well, that's it for this edition of Cooking with Kurma. I hope you enjoy preparing these dishes as much as I've enjoyed sharing them with you. Happy and healthy eating.